Good evening and welcome to The Square. Tonight's conversation comes on the 14th day of the official commemoration of the genocide against the Tutsi 27 years later. It's been one official week of mourning, and tonight's discussion is going to focus on international justice as well as genocide denial. We're going to touch on issues such as international cooperation, as well as increased transparency due to a series of activities based on this topic. And with us, I'm very happy to welcome, I'll start with our guest who's all the way from the United Kingdom. We have with us Linda Melvern, who is a British investigative journalist, as well as an author of several books on the genocide against the Tutsi. Linda, great to have you on The Square.
Good evening. Thank you very much for asking. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. We're also joined with us, we're here with Dr. Charity Vibabara, who is a national prosecutor at the National Public Prosecution Authority. Dr. Charity, great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much.
My name is Diana Mpisi, host of The Square. As always, I'm joined by The Square resident panelists. I'm here with Berna Namata, resident panelist of The Square. Great to have you on the show, Berna.
Thank you, Diana.
Also resident panelist on the show, Charles Haba. Great to have you on the show.
Same here, Diana. How are you?
Good.
Good.
Before we do, like we do on every other show, we have midweek highlights. Are there any midweek highlights The Square resident panelists would like to share? Charles or Berna?
So there's something that's been going around in regards to speed cameras, and I think I saw it today, but over the weekend and 2 days ago as well, I experienced it. So you drive and there are lots of cameras that's hidden and unhidden, and then you get surprise messages. And then I ask myself, are these traps, or they are actually warnings that you should not overspeed? Now, under normal circumstances, unless it's a cash cow, that COVID times have hit law enforcement so hard that they need to trap us to squeeze every penny from us. Under normal circumstances, you'd expect that.
There's a warning.
There's a warning that the same way they give you, there's an accident ahead, or there's cows crossing, or there's children crossing. It's the same way they should tell us there's cameras ahead. Otherwise, I think even revenue tells us that in 15 days' time you should pay. If you don't pay your taxes, this is the penalty. So I think it is a little bit unfair on the part of law enforcement.
You share that sentiment with a couple of, with several Rwandans who have had also echoing the same topic. Berna, any midweek highlights you'd like to share?
No, just
you look like you're in shock with what Charles just said.
Yeah, I think we have to be responsible road users, and that should be the principle. So whether the cameras are there or not, why are you bothered about the cameras in the first place? Just do the right thing and you won't worry who's watching you.
Yeah, fair point.
Yeah, fair point. But for me this week I've been excited about the vaccine discussion, manufacturing capacity, that, Africa's manufacturing capacity. For the first time, I think, almost 1 year down the road, we are seeing regional countries beginning to move beyond theory and actually try to implement plans around the continent's way forward with regards to COVID-19, because earlier we saw the partnership that was signed with Afrexim Bank, and we know right from the start, the technicians were saying goodwill will not resolve the issue. So it's good to see that the political leadership now across, not every country, but at least we are seeing that countries are beginning to understand that they have to involve the private sector and move forward. Yeah,
I followed actually the webinar the last 2 days that was going on. Very interesting insights. So going back to the topic at hand, international justice as well as genocide denial. To our guest, Linda Melvern, thank you very much for joining us. To our other guest, Dr. Charity Vibabara, thank you for joining us. The first topic I would like to kick off with, and I'll address it to you first, Dr. Charity, and also weigh in, listen to Linda weigh in on this question before we go to the next one, is on international justice. For many survivors of the genocide against the Tutsi, 27 years later, the pursuit of justice is still something that is ongoing. Many have not seen justice. We know, according to the genocide fugitives Tracking Unit, which operates under the NPPA, the National Public Prosecution Authority. Apparently, according to the GFTU, it has issued 1,146 indictments and arrest warrants against genocide fugitives in 33 countries to date. However, legal action has only been taken to 46 suspects, which means that 1,100 genocide fugitives still loom at large. And my question to you as a national prosecutor, Dr. Charity, what are some of the challenges in following through with international justice systems in bringing these genocide fugitives to book? If you could just kick off by telling us the challenges, and we'll move on later to some of the requests your institution has made in demanding more accountability. But just start off by telling us the challenges in why the pursuit of international justice is still an issue.
Thank you very much. Like you mentioned, when you're mentioning about the statistics that the Genocide Fugitive Tracking Unit within the National Public Prosecution Authority has dealt with, so far update we have 1,146 indictments that have been issued to different countries, which are 33 in total. However, we see a lack of cooperation among those countries because we only have 46 indictments where we have legal action undertaken, which is a challenge. And among those 46, we have 23 that have been prosecuted in foreign jurisdictions, and we have 23 that have been either transferred or extradited to Rwanda. So that is a huge challenge because we have 1,100 pending indictments and international arrest warrants that update we do not have any legal action being taken, which is a challenge. And that also goes with the enormous number of genocide fugitives. Apart from the 1,146 indictments that have been issued to different countries, we have a total of 71,568 indictments that we need to draft in the National Public Prosecution Authority. And where did they come from? After the closure of Gacaca courts, CNLG had to transfer the fugitive files to the National Public Prosecution. So even the enormous number of fugitives is a challenge that we have to deal with. There are also several other challenges that I cannot mention here, but just to mention why do we have such an enormous number of fugitives? Why do we face lack of cooperation from different countries? One of the reasons that we face lack of cooperation is because these fugitives are all over the world. They go in different countries. They keep changing their identity. They keep changing their names. If, for instance, we look at the case of Kabuga, when he was arrested last year, we found that he had so many names. He was identified under different names. So that becomes a challenge because if you're to issue an indictment or an international arrest warrant, you have to have a complete identity of the suspect at hand. And at times also they change locations. They move from one country to another country. Today they are in France, another year they are in Norway, another year they are traveling to different continents, or they are in Africa. So that is a challenge. You issue an indictment in France, then you find they've shifted or they've transferred or they've changed location. A case in point can be Mitro Miza Jean-Paul, where we issued an indictment in France, and this year he's now in Sweden. So we have to draft another indictment. Those are some of the challenges, and at times we find that these fugitives have acquired nationality of those countries, and for most countries, their national legislation provides that you cannot be extradited if you're a national. So that is also a challenge of apprehending these genocide fugitives. The challenges are so many, but 27 years after the genocide against the Tutsi, we also find the challenge of increased negationists, genocide deniers, and so on, as we shall keep discussing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charity, Dr. Charity, for a comprehensive overview of some of these challenges. Before we go to, some of the demands, some of the requests for accountability, our National Public Prosecution Authority and other Rwandan institutions specifically, focused on this particular issue. I would like to also weigh in from, Madam Linda Melbourne on, from your perspective as a researcher, as an author, as someone for, I think, 23 to 25 years, if I'm not mistaken, who has really been closely following the events after the genocide against the Tutsi from 1994. What would you say, in your perspective, are some of the challenges you've encountered, either connecting what Dr. Charity has said or some, different opinions of your own? Over to you, Linda Melbourne.
It's it's 27 years, in fact. Thank you so much for asking me to share 27 years of research. I think I perhaps should explain that I was in New York in April 1944, finishing a book about the United Nations. And I had a film crew there. Channel 4 was filming the book into a series for British television. And everybody knew, everybody knew ignorance was no excuse. And in April, I interviewed Ambassador Commander of the Czech Republic, Ambassador Keating, and Ambassador Ibrahim Ambari from Nigeria, who were desperate to send reinforcements. Now, the reluctance of the UK, the US, and France was obvious at that time. And I began to find out what was said by these states in the meetings of the Security Council. And this is absolutely fascinating because it's here that you first see the denial narrative that we hear today about, there's not one official story, there's another alternative story. All the denial claims that we see now were made in 1994. So on the fugitives, I think this is particularly dangerous because allowing the Hutu power ideologues to escape, as France did in 1994, has emboldened this continuing campaign to deny the genocide of the Tutsi. So it is very dangerous, the number of fugitives. Now, the 1948 Genocide Convention required states to prevent and, in the worst case, to punish this crime. So states are liable to arrest these fugitives. They are obliged, if they do not think legally, then they really are obliged morally to apprehend these genocide suspects, and they do not do that. I mean, it is really a question of us in the West holding our governments to account for their failure in 1994 to failure to abide by the convention, and now, all these years later, their failure to punish the perpetrators who escaped. I was pleased that Kabuga had been apprehended, but it had taken years to do it. And I should think that there is some really interesting aspects as to how he managed to escape justice all these years. So I think it is, to answer your question, it is up to us to make sure our governments abide by the 1948 Genocide Convention, the promise of never again.
Very much, Linda. I would like to just ask one more question to Dr. Charity before I hear from the Square resident panelists. Dr. Charity, my next question for you, still on this topic of international justice, as well as the challenges. If you could just share with us, are there specific demands or, ideal situations that the NPPA, the National Public Prosecution Authority, would put forward or has put forward to some of these international justice systems for more accountability, especially in pursuing justice for victims of the genocide, the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi?
have been taken definitely at a domestic level and at the international level. Maybe to start at the international level, we have had different mechanisms and different approaches dealing with genocide fugitives. For instance, we have had the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, which has dealt with several cases, 75 genocide trials. But also apart from the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, we've had third state prosecutions. If I say third state prosecutions, I mean prosecution of genocide perpetrators in third states. And we have had several of them. We've had trials in Belgium, in France. We've had trials in Norway, Canada. We've had several other trials in Netherlands. We had in Germany and several other countries, but mainly in Europe. And few extraditions have been secured on the African continent, which is a challenge. Actually, among the 1,146 indictments that the National Public Prosecution Authority has issued worldwide, 900 of them have been issued on the African continent, and we have only had 9 reactions out of the 900, which is a challenge. So the rest that we are talking about, the prosecutions that are happening abroad, are mainly happening on the European countries, but not in Africa, which remains as a challenge. Apart from the international approaches and the domestic trials in foreign states, definitely domestically we've had other approaches that are dealing with genocide fugitives, with genocide perpetrators in pursuit of justice. We have the national courts or the classical courts, which have been trying genocide suspects. The statistics that we have so far, the national courts have been able to deal with 15,500 genocide suspects, which is a big achievement. However, still, that does not finish the challenge that we have of the fugitive, the enormous number of fugitives that we have, those who participated in the genocide against the Tutsi. That's why, if we know, like most of us know our history, we've had Gacaca courts that operated from 2002 to 2012, that was 10 years of its operation. And the figures or the statistics for the accomplished case files were 1.9 million cases, almost 2 million in 10 years of their operation. If you compare with the national courts, they had 15,000 trials, or they held 15,000 genocide trials, while the ICTR in the same period held 75 genocide trials and other international crimes. If we talk about genocide against the Tutsi, we should also not forget that there are other international crimes, which is genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. So what are the efforts at the domestic level that are being done? So apart from all those trials that have happened and justice has been rendered to victims, and victims, if I mean victims, I'm not only meaning the Rwandan community. Remember, we are talking about genocide as an international crime. This means that the whole of the international community has been offended. That's why it is called international. That is why we can differentiate genocide from murder, killing an individual or individuals, but genocide, if you look at its definition, it is trying to kill or to destroy a protected group, or in whole or in part. So the offenders are not only targeting a person or individuals, but they are targeting a protected group. And if you look at the convention, or even our law in Article 91 of the Law Punishing Persons of 2018, you find the protected groups are 4, and the groups are exhaustive. You find ethnic group, you find national group, you find religious group, and you find racial group. For the context of the genocide against the Tutsis, we find that the target group was the ethnic group, so which falls under the protected or the 4 protected groups in the convention. So the challenge still remains that though we have had those trials, but there are several other fugitives around. Even the reactions of countries is very slow. In as much as we are appreciating the several countries that we mentioned that are trying to deal with genocide cases, but we have others that are really very slow. We have investigations that have been ongoing since 2007. Imagine that justice, and we know that justice delayed is justice denied. We also have a challenge that some of these countries do not have even the political will to cooperate. Remember, genocide is an international crime. It is the duty and obligation, like Linda Marvin was saying, of every country to respond, to act. And we have this principle in Latin, it is aut dedere, aut judicare. It says that you either prosecute or you extradite. So some of the countries have not even prosecuted the genocide suspects, but again, they are not also willing to extradite to willing countries and able countries that need to prosecute these genocide suspects for the genocide against the Tutsi. So that remains a challenge, and yet we have international customary law that is putting it as a mandatory norm for these countries to prosecute, and where they cannot prosecute due to different reasons, maybe legal problems, legal challenges, for instance, where some countries have argued that the genocide against the Tutsi took place in 1994 or happened in 1994, and we did not have, or they did not have legislation that was criminalizing genocide. So following the principles of non-retroactivity, they cannot prosecute. However, they ignore the fact that the law requires them or mandates them, if they cannot prosecute due to different reasons, then they should extradite. And we have offered several indictments, like we mentioned, but with few responses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Charity. Absolutely. I think we're going to get to the next part of the conversation, whereby these are challenges you've mentioned. Linda Melvin gave us a historical context of these challenges that even began straight after the genocide, 1994 in the halls of the UN, so to speak. And we'll look at elements of, optimism. We have the Duclair Commission, the report that just came out. We have, the capture of Mr. Felicien Kabuga last year due to international cooperation. So we'll move to that segment of the conversation just shortly. But with that said, I'd like to just hand over to the resident panelists to also weigh in on what you, Dr. Charity, and Linda Melvin have said with regards to international justice. Charles, I'll kick off with you. You studied in law. I don't think you made that your career, but I know you studied law. So what is your take on this issue of international justice when it comes to the pursuit of justice for fugitives based on the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi?
I think I'll kick off from the last point that you said around the highs, even though there isn't any high about the genocide against the Tutsi, but where points have been scored, I think that's the point that you raised. But by virtue of the fact that the ICTR managed to get the UN to pass a resolution that the appellation of the genocide will be genocide against the Tutsi, I think that was an extremely high, because it was very easy, and up to today it's one of the biggest thorns in whatever is happening. Where people will call it mass murders, atrocities, and so on and so forth. So deniers will come across all, will conveniently call it whatever they can. But by virtue of the fact that the International Crimes Tribunal did manage to get the UN to pass that convention around the appellation, I think that's one big high. The second big high, that big score in your own words, Diana, that I want to commend, and I think Dr. alluded to it, is around the countries that have managed to extradite people who are on the wanted list to Rwanda, and that should be commended. Now, that said, double standards of the West are something that always perturb me. There is just no way you can get away with denying that the Holocaust did not happen. Yet the convention, and the international instruments that govern the genocide are one and the same. So that's extremely intriguing. That you can get onto all these social media platforms, all these international media houses, all these publishing houses, and deny that actually a genocide against the Tutsi took place in Rwanda. But you can't get that even a zillionth of airtime to say that the Holocaust did not take place. So that's one of the things that I think, whether it's, I'm not too sure it's Daktari's fault. Probably Linda still has a lot of work to do in the wonderful work that she does. But I think it's also it's a concerted effort amongst all of us to ensure that we do not continue to have these double standards done here.
Absolutely. Berna?
It's a complicated issue, and personally, when I was reflecting on this discussion, I was wondering, who is the international community, and because, I mean, the international community has always been there before the genocide against the Tutsi, during the genocide against the Tutsi, and after that. So, who exactly are we talking about? So, to that extent, sometimes I feel we shouldn't spend a lot of time discussing the so-called international community and the international justice, because clearly it doesn't work. She's just given numbers around Gacaca, and we've seen yes, ICTR with millions of dollars, and all they did, most of it went to expatriates. Up to today, there are people still earning under the ICTR residual mechanism. So I don't have such hope in international justice.
You're a bit of a pessimist when it comes to that.
Yes. But I know that it is possible to lobby, get more countries to understand your problems, and get those countries to actually help you. Because what she's describing, the dilemma with extraditions, is because usually when it comes up, one, people don't treat it as serious as it should be, and then it becomes political. So again, you need at national level to have a political decision to stand with you. We've seen, I think, Belgium is trying. We're not yet there, but Belgium, over the last couple of years, I think has been trying, and we need to see more of that. Secondly, maybe we should be also begin to kind of accept the reality that there are 1,000, maybe a lost cause. I mean, if you have limited resources, you also want to deploy them carefully. And why do I say this? If you look at the rising cases of genocide denial, especially among the young generation, how are you going to deal with that? Where are the resources going to come from? Now, you have these fugitives that have rebranded, and it's extremely difficult. Imagine you issue an indictment and this person crosses and they're in a different country. And what we have seen over the years, it's not just that. They rebrand like completely. Most of them, when they left, they became parish priests. They're in all sorts of communities who have no idea whatsoever of their past. So when an indictment comes in, at national level, everybody's saying, no, this is a good priest. We've known this person for the last, 20 years, So it's a difficult one. But I think for the National Prosecution Office, they have to take some hard decisions going forward. Because when you're faced with a younger generation that is becoming difficult, extremely difficult, and very, very deliberate in terms of distorting history, where do you want to put your resources? Yeah, because it's very expensive, It's very expensive, and I wish and I hope we'll have more of the Lindas. Now, Linda has documented what happened, yeah?
In the last 27 years.
Yes, but her voice is being drowned. you know, and I worry about that. Her voice is being drowned and she's branded, you know, she was there. So I don't know, but I think we need to have a national conversation around where we are headed and how we need to deal with these issues.
I think, Benna, you raise very compelling, arguments. But I'm just thinking, if you put yourself in the shoes of a survivor, and you're saying, the 1,100 fugitives out there, should we just consider that a lost cause and, refocus our resources and energies on something else? I really wonder. And before I go to Linda Melvin, because I now want to tackle complicity and denial of crimes, I just want to quickly go to you, Dr. Charity. What's your take on that? I know you're here on behalf of the NPPA, but when you look at those 1,100 fugitives that are still out there, is it something that the NPPA can consider saying, okay, you know what, let's remobilize our resources elsewhere, or are we going to fight until the very end, until all 1,100 fugitives are brought to justice? What's your take on this, Dr. Charity?
Yeah, on that interesting question that you've asked, we are not going to quit. We are keeping the move. We are keeping the strategies. We are not going to keep silent, because silence means we want to distort the history of the genocide against the Tutsi. So what are we going to do as the National Public Prosecution Authority? We are going to keep issuing other indictments, maybe to bring this clarity. It's not only 1,000 or over 1,000 fugitives that we have. In as much as we have issued 1,146 indictments, we have other fugitives in our database that we have not issued indictments and international arrest warrants for. So we are going to keep advocating for prosecution in different countries, and where they cannot prosecute, then they should extradite to Rwanda. And we are also going to keep advocating that different countries which raise the challenge of their domestic laws for amendment, because it's possible. I mean, in as much as they say that they do not have laws, or they did not have laws punishing genocide, but under international customary law, international crimes can be punished. We have seen that with the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda and other mechanisms. Even those countries that are dealing with genocide at the moment, the genocide against the Tutsi, it's not that they had the laws, but they follow international customary law, which is binding to all countries. And apart from that, we already had legislation under international law criminalizing genocide. The 1948 Genocide Convention, and most states are signatories to this 1948 Genocide Convention. So we are going to keep the fight, because impunity has to be fought. And if you look at one of the main causes of the genocide against the Tutsi, it is because of impunity. For several years, there was no punishing of perpetrators. There was no punishing of genocide ideologies. Because remember, even before the genocide against the Tutsi, there were genocide ideologies. It is not something that just happened or started on 7th April. There was the planning stage for many years before. So we are going to keep the fight through indicting different other fugitives, issuing international arrest warrants to different countries, but also securing cooperation. And in that regard, for instance, like now, the National Public Prosecution Authority has engaged in 2 different forums. It is a member of the East African Association of Prosecutors, and for every single meeting, we attend that meeting. We always advocate for extradition of those suspects, or for prosecution in the countries where they fled to. And also the National Public Prosecution is a member of the African Prosecutors Association, which is an association that includes all prosecutors in Africa and at a regional level. So this is also another important forum where we keep advocating for prosecution and extradition of those suspects. But apart from the regional approaches that the National Public Prosecution has taken, with the support definitely of the government, it is also a member of the International Association of Prosecutors, which brings all prosecutors together. And for all meetings, there is that, or conferences, there is that advocacy for prosecution or for transfer or extradition of the suspects of the genocide against the Tutsi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Charity, and thank you for just really, giving us a very strong illustration, at least from the legal perspective, not only just locally in Rwanda and the region, but also internationally, the different institutions, the mechanisms that are at play, starting from '94 until, to date, and that are still going to go strong until every last genocide fugitive is brought to book. That is something that I know we're in it for the long haul, so to speak. I'd like us to now just to go to, we have, the second part of the conversation to do with the complicity and denials of crimes. And Linda, I'll direct this question to you, if you may allow me to just give a brief background context of who you are. You're a seasoned and celebrated British investigative journalist, researcher, and author of 3 books. The latest 3 books on the genocide against the Tutsi, the latest being Intent to Deceive, Denying the Genocide of the Tutsi. And in one of your most recent articles, and I'm referring to the one that was published in the New Times just last week, you stated that the purpose of denial is to destroy truth and memory. So as a writer who's extensively covered complicity and denial of crimes, to do with the genocide against the Tutsi, what do you think are the main causes of these more emboldened actions by genocidaires and deniers 27 years later, regarding 27 years later from the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi?
Well, I think they encourage each other. They use each other as sources, as though this was some sort of scholarly research, which it's not. But you do have all you need to fight this denial. It's not as though you don't have the facts. And I think that I might usefully list on my website the number of reports that there have been that show that the extermination of the Tutsi, the genocide against the Tutsi in 1994 was premeditated, planned in advance, systematic, and methodical. That all the denial, all the foundation stones of this denial campaign can be challenged factually. It was not spontaneous, this ridiculous notion. Now, why publishing houses like Penguin Random House have been taken in by this, I think is a very serious issue. I think that journalistically there are questions to answer. I do not understand why a publishing house like Penguin Random House should have published the work of Judy Rever. I think it's extraordinary. Now, each part of the denial campaign, present in her books and present in others, is familiar. These are old claims. All the deniers are doing is repeating the claims that the genocidaire made in 1994. It's just circulating the same old rubbish about spontaneity and the RPF downing the plane. All of this a part of denial. Now, what you do to challenge it is you stand by the facts, you use the facts. There are not 2 stories. There's not an official story and another story that the deniers have somehow miraculously come up with. There's an official story, and it is based on a mass of material evidence. It's based on the trials at the ICTR, on all the inquiries, as I've explained, that there have been from the very first one set up by the Security Council in November 1994. There is not an untold story, as the BBC suggested in its documentary in 2014. I had a response from a BBC executive when we complained against that programme to tell me that the planning, there were doubts about the planning of the genocide against the Tutsi. This is absolutely extraordinary that journalists still believe this. And all we can do is challenge it. I do I think that that they shouldn't get away with it. I think that we must build a response. I think every single part of the denial, whether it's the killing was spontaneous or the RPF, I think we should marshal the facts so that we have those ready each time these erroneous claims are made. I think that you have everything you need. I think in all the inquiries that there have been, be rest assured, the facts are there for you. There's not two versions of what happened. There's not an official story and another. There's one story, and it is based on a massive evidence, and it must be used to challenge denial.
Thank you very much, Linda. I'd like us to just go to our Twitter feed very quickly because we have a series of tweets that are coming in. Some of them were addressed to you, Linda. Some of them addressed to Dr. Charity. And, the first tweet that I'd like us to hear from, I'll read it out, is from Dolapoina, who says 1,146 indictments and only 46 indictments undertaken. And he's quoting you, Dr. Charity. He says, what measures are there that can be implemented to mitigate the challenges? Also, why are African countries not cooperating? That's the first tweet we have from Dolapo to you, Dr. Charity. We have a second tweet, and he says, if Linda Melbourne's interviews with the UN ambassadors of Nigeria, New Zealand, and the Czech Republic were already raising concerns, from your perspective, why was there denial from the corridors of the UN as of 1994? We have another tweet coming in. I think this is also still addressed to this is addressed to, I think, Dr. Charity. I think our PPA, as a concerned institution, is doing its work right. Some countries hosting fugitives should first accept that the genocide against the Tutsi happened in Rwanda, as confirmed by the United Nations. That's the only way that will ease bringing fugitives to justice. We have another tweet coming in, and this tweet again is from Dolapo, and he says, another question for Linda Melbourne. When the Holocaust occurred, Israel had to convince the international community that it happened. Can Israel's template for combating the Holocaust denials and revisionisms be a template for countries to adapt? I think these are the tweets so far that we will have. So just very quickly, and I really need you to be brief, Dr. Charity and Linda, in answering these questions before we go to the last segment of the show. So Dr. Charity, briefly, if you can answer that question, trying to mitigate these issues of, especially when dealing with African countries. You mentioned some compelling numbers. You said around 900 indictments, and in Africa only 9 have been respected. If you could just briefly try and answer that question that was put forward by our tweet.
Yeah. Regarding the question of mitigating the issues that are related to international cooperation, specifically on the African continent, where we have sent different indictments, 900 of them, and only have 9 that have been executed or where legal action has been taken. The solution, I will not give like a conclusive solution. There are many complementary solutions that could be helping or that could help to mitigate the challenges related to that. But one of it is to sensitize or to advocate for different countries, because the challenge they always raise is with their domestic jurisdiction and their domestic laws. So we can advocate for amendment of their laws in order to deal with genocide crimes and other international crimes. But also the other challenge with these countries that also leads us not to secure cooperation is that prosecuting and trying genocide cases is very expensive. So that's why we applaud the countries that have done it. For instance, like in the past 6 months, the countries that are dealing with genocide cases for the genocide committed against the Tutsi, we've had the UK Logatory Commission coming to Rwanda, so they have to travel from their countries. We've had the Belgian Logatory Commission coming to Rwanda to conduct investigations of genocide suspects that are living within their country. We've had the French Logatory Commission coming. We've also had the Dutch Logatory Commission coming to Rwanda to conduct investigations. What does it tell us? It tells us that these investigations are really very expensive. So it requires the willingness of the states that are harboring these fugitives to to conduct and invest in them. But they have an option, however, if you cannot prosecute, in as much as NPPA is flexible and willing to facilitate in any way the investigations, because the crimes happened here in Rwanda. But if they cannot prosecute because of different challenges, be it legal challenges or even logistical challenges, they can extradite to willing countries. And it's not only Rwanda, any country that punishes genocide can deal with the crimes of genocide.
Thank you very much, Dr. Charity. Linda, if you could just answer briefly the questions that were put forward to you with regards to...
There's one that I can answer that's really important, sort of answers the others, I think, and that is, why was there a program of denial in the corridors of the UN in 1994? The interim government, the genocidal interim government, had a non-permanent seat in the Security Council for the duration of the genocide. This government was represented in the Security Council. So it was there that it began to say that the victims have brought this upon them, etc., etc., the foundation stones of the denial that we now know so well, were first spread in the corridors of the UN by the Rwandan ambassadors representing that interim government. So this is how the blueprint for the denial is found at the UN, and France in the Security Council at this time, knowing what was really happening in Rwanda, tolerated this Rwandan ambassador who was representing a genocidal regime, as did all the others. No one asked him to leave, and he sat there for 3 months spreading genocide denial.
Linda, I wish we had lots of time to answer as many tweets that are coming off our social media channels, but we don't. I'd just like to hand over again to my resident panelists. If you can really be brief, just commenting on what Dr. Charity, Linda, as well as social media feed has put out. Charles, very briefly, over to you.
Yeah, I think I have only two simple ones, and one is related to what Dr. said around their grouping, that I think she said African Association of Public Prosecutors. And I ask myself, because the statistics that Dr. shared with us around the cooperation of African governments is extremely appalling.
They're dismal. It's terrible.
Extremely dismal.
Exactly.
So I'm wondering, is this just a social grouping to justify per diems to travel across the globe, across the continent, or we actually expect something tangible? So we expect a lot more if such groupings have been set up. So that is on the one side. But a little bit related to that, I think we expect the big fish, the big boys, and especially the UK, by virtue of the fact, because some of the statistics, again back to Dr. that she gave us on where these people are, the big fish, the fugitives, by virtue of the fact that we haven't had the UK neither extradite nor try, is extremely concerning. And you can imagine what that would mean if the UK did such a bold step, what it would mean for the rest of everybody else who's bothered that a 99-year-old has passed on. So we really toe a line of the world toes a line of the British, and that's the first point that I wanted to raise. The second one is really around time. It's 27 years on, and the time that has come by, whether it is for genocide survivors who would have testified against perpetrators, or masterminds who are growing old, who may never see justice. It's a huge dilemma for the cause of justice. I mean, the oldest adage in justice is justice. In the legal world is justice delayed is justice denied. I don't know whether this conundrum will ever be solved, but it's time. Time is the race against time that Dr. and her colleagues have is probably one of the biggest challenges they have.
Yeah. Absolutely. Brenna, just very briefly before we have closing remarks from our guests.
I mean, again, it's a difficult one. Look at the timeline since the arrest of Kafka.
And Linda Melvin alluded to it. Why has it taken, 20
Look at the
years?
timeline,
Yeah.
and now even when he's in their hands, look at how long it's taking. And then we talk about the reality of chasing the other big fish, So it's a tough one. It's a tough one, but again, you have to be very firm and send a message. Again, I insist, I feel that we need to pay attention to the rising cases of the descendants and the young people.
Yeah, absolutely. Linda, I would like you to just give closing remarks on this conversation that we've had. Over to you before we go over to Dr. Charity.
Morakozi-chan, thank you very much indeed. Very kind. I think that as we've seen with the Holocaust in Europe from 70 years ago, that denial of genocide never ends. It continues long after the killing is over, and it ensures that the crime continues. And each generation will have to fight it. And I believe it needs to be constantly challenged wherever it occurs. You cannot let a denialist worldview take hold. And it may seem as though it's coming in waves at the moment, and it certainly does to me. But we have the facts. We have the facts. And that's all we have. And we must fight denial with the facts and not stop. I think it is something that needs to carry on with energy and enthusiasm. And I encourage everyone to take part, really. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. It's been an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show, especially, based on your 27-year commitment of just, as you, in your own words, repeating the facts over and over again, especially in the face of genocide ideology and genocide denial. So it's been great having you on the show. I look forward to hosting you many more times in the future. Thank you very much, Linda.
Thank you.
I would like us to just have our closing remarks given by Dr. Charity. Over to you. Thank you for giving us also a very great illustration of the legal system and the challenges and our National Public Prosecution Authority and the work being done. If you could just finish and by sharing some closing remarks on this topic.
Yeah. Maybe to start with the challenge of genocide deniers, those who have genocide ideology and negationists. It's important to note that the Karemera judicial decision in 2006, that was on 16th June, ruled that it is undisputed and irreversible that the genocide that happened in Rwanda was committed against the Tutsis. So now we have different judicial decisions, and remember, a court decision becomes a law and is binding. To dispute it, it would require another court decision. So for now, judiciary, it has been established that the genocide that happened in Rwanda was committed against the Tutsis, which is a protected group in the ethnic group. And also to inform that though genocide denial or ideology is not an international crime, we can call upon countries like in Europe, all over the globe, to enact legislation punishing genocide deniers. If we look at the statistics from the Rwanda Investigation Bureau, for this year, since 7th April 2021 till to date, they've received 87 cases of genocide denial and related cases. That is genocide ideology and related offenses, because there are other 7 offenses that we did not have time to talk about. And they are now investigating 83 of the cases, and they have submitted 14 cases to the National Public Prosecution Authority, which shows that we still have a challenge of genocide ideology and genocide deniers and negationists. However, like Linda Marvin said, we are going to keep the fight because we have legislation that punishes anyone, either through speech, orally, or either in written form or video forms, who does acts of genocide ideology in public. To conclude on what you had asked about the pursuit of international justice, the National Public Prosecution Authority, together with other government institutions and the international community like the International Residue Mechanisms for International Criminal Tribunals, which is the former ICTR, other countries that are willing to prosecute are going to keep on advocating for prosecution and pursuit of justice for the victims. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Charity. Wow, just in 1 week, there have been over 80 cases of genocide denial, just in this official week of mourning. That just shows you how much more needs to go into fighting this cause. Thank you very much, Dr. Charity. Thank you very much, Linda Melvern. Thank you very much, Berna and Charles. Always great to hear your very interesting and informative points and opinions. To our viewers, thank you for tuning in. I would also like to thank especially our social media followers who keep on sharing their opinions and questions on our social media feed. You can keep the conversation going using #TheSquareRW. I'd also like to thank our partners, Uzi Collections and Bourbon Coffee. Thank you. Have a very good week and see you again next time. Thank you.